The following may contain inappropriate language. All opinions expressed by the host and guests do not reflect the views of any company or service.
This is Radio Havana, Cuba.
This is Radio Pyongyang of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
This is Moscow.
All right, everybody, it's that time once again to do the Crazy Talk. And as you would guess, I am just so thrilled to be here tonight. That's right, on November 16th, 2009, episode 9 of Crazy Talk. And I'm wearing the red hat tonight. And, it's a little bit crooked. I don't know. We'll fix that. For those of you listening, I know you're all listening. It won't matter because you can't see it anyway, and just as well. But we're going to get started. We got lots of stuff to talk about. But you know what? I want to just jump in with my guest. I'm really happy to have him. I hit him up a while back. When I first started, because I met him. He's a Portland guy, okay? And I met him through NaPodPoMo last year. And he was doing NaPodPoMo too, posting a podcast or audiocast once a day in the month of November of 2008. He was Broken Hours. Some of the stuff he was podcasting and producing were these... like these audio landscapes, and being an audiophile myself, it was really exciting to hear some of the stuff. And I think his last one, or close to the last one, he did this like big landscape where it took place at Ignite, and it was just crazy to hear all the people and the voices and everything. So I consider this guy an expert in podcasting and audio landscapes and all those sorts of things. And just a reminder, this is an experiment. This isn't necessarily a show. It's an experiment in podcasting, or an experiment in audio. So let's bring him in right now. This is Luke Lefler, Broken Hours. Luke, are you there?
Oh, Doc, I'm so glad you took my call.
Hey.
Doc, I need your help, man. I just can't seem to face up to the facts.
Caller, what is the question? Can you get to the question,
tense,
caller?
And I'm nervous, and I can't relax.
Sounds
it's
like
a privilege to be here, Doc.
Hey, man.
Thanks for inviting me to be on the program.
Well, I really wanted to get you on, and I know I hit you up early on. I DM'd you. That was when we started this about a week or so ago. By we, I mean me. So I really wanted to get you on, and this was a great opportunity. Now, the funny thing is, you're not just sitting at home watching V and getting bored and calling into a podcast. Where are you tonight, and what are you doing? Tell us about your project.
I'm sitting on a picnic table outside of Three Friends Coffee House on Southeast 12th Avenue in Portland. We're very fortunate that it's mild evening and dry, so I'm able to sit out here with my Lenovo netbook. That is not a paid plug, by the way, and I'm outside of the Three Friends Coffee House, where tonight we every Monday night, and as a matter of fact, my collaborator and I, with Show and Tell Gallery, put on a program, a live event that's occurring right now. In fact, there's an open mic going on inside right now. That's all of our doing. And I'm recording it inside. There's a digital recorder running, and I'm recording it for a podcast to be edited and put up on the internet sometime this week.
Yeah, you post these open mics weekly, right? To your site.
Yes, we have we have an invited program that where we invite some people to perform from 7 to 8 p.m. on Monday nights. And then at 8:15, we turn on the mic and basically hose down the crowd with some open mic goodness. And then yes, I cut 2, sometimes 3 audio files because the open mic is 90 minutes oftentimes, and that's just too big of a file to put up, too big of an MP3. So I usually cut it into 2 parts if it's long enough and meaty enough. And then the invited reading is another hour long. So sometimes there's 3 audio files that go up each week on showandtellgallery.org.
So what's your target time? Is it like 30 minutes or something like that for each of the files? Just so it's in nice consumable bites. Is that what you're trying to do?
Yeah, usually the invited part, the first hour is turns out to be like a 55 to 60 minutes file that's generally running anywhere from 90 to 125 megs, and it's a heavy download. It's kind of a choppy stream if you want to just jump right into it, but it's manageable if you have a decent connection. And then the other sometimes between 35 and 45 minutes for the open mic parts 1 and 2.
Gotcha. So is this just kind of your standard coffee house open mic, or is there something special, or is it like the fact that you're recording it and you're podcasting it as well? I mean, is there something unique, or is it audio? What goes on at the open mic? I mean, is it music, comedy, readings?
It's an open format, so basically any kind of performance, any kind of art is welcome. We encourage collaborations. We've had people, it's mostly either spoken word or music, but sometimes there'll be like a drama or some that we've had people that are like basically lie on the floor and kind of like talk to the ceiling, and it mostly falls into that first category of the typical open mic coffee house sort of vibe. And I think that the podcasting does tend to maybe raise the stakes a little bit. Most of the people know they're being recorded. Some people come out just to because they want to get an audio piece out there, and so yeah, I think that does kind of raise the stakes a little bit.
So when people are lying on the floor and talking to the ceiling, you don't have an announcer come in and go, currently they're lying on the floor. No?
No, generally not, because it's their bag, and it's not about me necessarily.
Right.
It's like what people want to do, and it's their art. So yeah, I mean, if it was kind of like, welcome to the Barren Landscape Show or whatever, and I was doing this kind of thing where, like your show, for example, where there's a lot of your personality in it, or Cammy or whomever, right. Kind of, and I've done that. I've done a radio where, I've been a big kind of personality ego that sort of trumps on everything. But, in this format, I like to just let the performers, basically give it their best shot and kind of stay out of the way. Cool.
So I'd like to step back, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit about the Barren Landscape. First of all, you've been doing audio for quite some time, right?
It feels like it, and I remember my grandpa had a reel-to-reel tape recorder that had variable speeds on it.
Oh yeah,
and and they would play these kind of hick spiritual songs, and it was like, Dullsville. But when I got my hands on that thing, it was like, okay, I'm going to record my voice at a slow speed and then play it back at a fast speed. And I just laughed myself silly doing that. And it just kind of stuck. And that's what I've always enjoyed doing, is just kind of that manipulation of sound, where you can, you're really twisting reality in a way when you're doing that. So it's from a very young age, I was always playing with audio.
So when you were a kid, did you get all excited one day and take the razor blades to the grandparents' Perry Como tapes, or how did that work?
Oh, I'm afraid I was pretty bad in that regard. I did everything. I mean, there's something about you put that record on a turntable and put a needle in it and watch it spin around and it makes sound and you go, well, I wonder what would happen if I put a regular straight pin in there or a marking pin and yeah, I messed up quite a bit of stuff and I probably destroyed some pretty valuable records. I didn't want to like mess with their tapes so much, but it was later on when I actually got kind of a sense of that I could get away with things like that. That I would start recording people's voices or whatever, and then messing them up, and just whatever made me laugh basically was the was the product. That was the aim, is to just have fun.
So when did you start doing that? I mean, what tender age did you start experimenting with audio?
Well, I guess that those days must have been I was probably 5 or 6 years old.
Wow.
And then then later on with got my first cassette recorder, and I would and I know a lot of people have done this, so I'm not embarrassed to say it, but I mean I would like make little radio shows in my room. I listened to like Top 40 radio and I thought these people were gods. They were coming out of the radio and their voices, and Radio Land, and the whole thing was just amazing to me. And I just wanted to emulate it. So I would get my records together and I would play them, and then and make a break, and then talk and say this was that, and here's this, and then play another record. And I thought it was pretty cool. And then I thought, well, I'll just send these to the radio station, and then I kind of like stopped hearing back from them. So, I knew that I kind of had to mature a little bit before I was really in that league.
Now, did you ultimately get a job in audio and radio, or did this lead, or was this just something that you've always had, going on?
It's just always been a pastime and a kind of an avocation. I met a friend in high school that did work in radio, that actually got a job as a kind of I guess a gopher or some kind of a mule for the radio station, the kind of alternative rock radio station in Seattle at the time, and we would go down there in the middle of the night and hang out with the DJs, and he would bring home all these promo records, and it was just kind of a fascinating world. And then he got a program at a community college radio station, and so he was doing his own program, and I would come down there and watch him do that. And I said, well, this is something I always wanted to do, but I never really, wasn't kind of an aggressive type, so I never really knew how to kind of get my foot in the door. But when I went to college, it wasn't until I was over 2 years into college that I found out that the college had a radio station. And this was in Bellingham, Washington. And I started DJing at the college station in Bellingham, Washington in the summer of 1980. And it was easy pickings because the student, the population was pretty light over the summer. So I was doing like 8 or 10 hours a day, 8 or 10 hours a week of programming. And that's pretty much where I learned my chops in a radio station studio, was at the station KUGS in Bellingham.
So that was in college,
and then oh yeah, and it was like it was a great time. It was like 1980. It was punk had broken, and record companies had started to send really cool records to the station. So we were getting all this stuff from Rough Trade and Factory, and we were just like, this is cool. And we really enjoyed it. We were doing program commission. We got all these bands to come to college, and it was just a really good scene. But eventually that college ended and kind of moved on. But during that experience, what I picked up on was this idea that you could start mixing sound sources. And so I would go and make pre-production backup tapes, and I would do all this sort of kind of soundtracky stuff where you were like recording Indian tablas or whatever, and turn up the Revoxes really loud so you get lots of echo effects, and then use it to segue between songs, and it became more of a just kind of an experiment than anything else.
So no, do I have this right? Did you do some work at KBOO as well, community radio?
Oh yeah. When I got out of college, I moved to Vancouver, Washington to live with my folks, and I ended up hanging out more in Portland, and ultimately was in Portland for an extended stay, where I remain today. And a friend of mine turned me on to KBOO, and so I started volunteering. I said, I still had the bug. I still wanted to do radio. And KBOO was the perfect opportunity to do it. So I wrote community calendar for a year and kind of made my face known around there, and eventually got a program. And it was Sunday night at midnight, and it started in 1983.
Oh wow!
And I called it Barren Landscapes Broken Hours, and I did that program for 10 years until I retired in '93 from community radio.
What was the music? What was the mix? What did you play? Were the music and the
well,
bands?
yeah, I mean, look at the dates. I mean, I was my
the reason I ask is I think I used to
was,
listen to that show.
You probably know. You can probably name off a few things too. But
yeah,
I mean, '83. It was. I was listening to lots of Mark Almond and Godley and Cream, and I was always into British rock, and so that was what my main kind of thing was. But I would dig out whatever was in the library, and I would do these little kind of set pieces where I had written stuff that was. I'd written these really long kind of surrealistic raps that were not normal at all.
Yes.
No offense. But they were just strange, and I had a really kind of weird radio persona where I sound like I was half stoned or from another planet.
I remember.
It was terrestrial, but it was just, and the broken was like the theme. It's like everything was like kind of askew, not really together. It was kind of like the way I felt about life. There was this kind of like. There was always some sort of lack of cohesiveness in things, and so I just kind of tried to transmit that as a kind of a theme or that was kind of a vision that I purveyed on the radio.
So yeah, I remember those shows, and that was a lot of fun, and KBOO was just a lot of fun back then. You mentioned the bands, what was going on in college radio. I remember when I was like in grade school, and that's when album-oriented radio, where you'd go and you listen to like KGON back then, and you literally laugh. Even as a little kid, I'd laugh because the DJs would go out and smoke dope. And just leave the record on, and and just let it, you'd listen to the side of Skynyrd, and at the end for about 10 minutes it would be like waiting for the DJ to come back and flip over the record, right? And that was just so awesome, because it was raw, it was real, and then by the time the 80s came around, I think the late 70s and the 80s, I think those stations had really become more corporate and corporate rock. And KBOO is where I started listening to like the early punk, where I was getting exposed to just, the punk and KBOO. I was reading a wiki just recently about the intimate relationship that the band The Residents had with KBOO.
Sure.
And it was just a lot of fun. I mean, that's where I heard my first Black Flag and, Romeo Void and stuff. There was just some great stuff on there. I was either going to listen to jazz, and for that, there really wasn't a jazz station back then, so it would just be like, I'd have to go get a record or go get a record from the library or listen to KBOO. And you're talking about the spoken word stuff is awesome.
KBOO is wonderful because it does allow all of those different type of formats to have a home on the radio. It's not a 24-hour free format radio station like say KEXP or there's other stations out there that are like that. And that's one thing that I really kind of would like, is to have that sort of radio station around. And KBOO's very, I don't know, everything's, don't want to say compartmentalized necessarily, but there are strips for programming. There's the African American strip, there's a jazz strip, there's a public affairs strip, there's a new music strip, a rock and roll, and then there are all these other kind of sensibilities mixed into it, but it's very programmer driven, and it's targeted at specific audiences at specific times of the day. The kind of radio that you're talking about, like it back in the 70s, and that's when I came of age, and that's when I would like to hear, a 10-minute Al Stewart track or something, and then followed by the Fugs, or, I mean, things were just, they just would do whatever they felt like doing, and then you're right, they hit on this formula, and I blame, bands like, and I hate to blame the musicians, but bands like the Cars and Foreigner that really kind of found this, ticket of this kind of crossover between progressive rock and commercial rock, and kind of milked it, and everyone wanted to hear it, and they would play it over and over, and it kind of destroyed the whole album-oriented rock format.
Well,
and now you can't.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think that the hit making has been around since the early days, since Cleveland. I mean, back in the rock and roll days and the payola days. I mean, that type of radio has always been there. It's just that
there was always a place there.
Yeah, it just kind of took a turn in the late '60s, and seemed to take a turn in the late '60s and the early '70s to this, when FM came to be, and this more fluid, open air kind of album oriented radio. That's also when with the Beatles coming out. In the 60s, in the late 60s, with album sides, and people would start listening to the whole album rather than just getting the 45s and their favorite hit song, and maybe playing the flip side. I think KBOO's format has changed over the years since then. It's a little more, I think, community activist, public affairs oriented now than it was.
It got very activist at one phase, I think, and it's still kind of activist, but it's I think it's mellowed out considerably, and it's actually really, I think, a pretty vibrant thing again these days, which is nice to see, because they've been going at it over 30 years now, and it's it's a really valuable community assets in Portland.
Yeah,
but I was stuck in that era of the kind of just free form radio, and that's what I wanted. That's what I did when I was on the air. It was, I'd break it up with these little kind of segments or weird sound collages, and then play extended mixes and follow it up with instrumentals and just being really eclectic and if there was a theme to a show that was like more focused, then that was I hyped it, and we did the thing. We walked through that, and then next week it was back to Bizarro World with 20-minute orb tracks and mixing in creatures and whatever happened to be handy.
So what was your inspiration for all of that? The barren landscape, the audio landscapes that you put together, that you've been putting together since then. What was your...
I'd say one of my biggest influences, who never really realized it, I think, was this guy that I went to college with, who was in the radio station, named Lyle Pearson. And he put on a film series, and then each week before the film, he would do what he called the soundtrack to the film on the radio, and he would mix all this stuff together, and for some reason he had a great ear for it. And probably because he was talented, but he would take like a Bach cantata and then play Buckminster Fuller lecture with it, and then Miriam Makeba doing vocals, and it just had this weird sync that worked. And I said, geez, this is different. It's creating something on the air, as opposed to just playing, bringing your bag of records and playing one after the other. You're actually doing something with the equipment, I think. And so that was a big inspiration. The guy who I was talking about, who got the job at the radio station and went to college, he started collecting records at a young age, and he had this really nice record collection that was all organized and everything, and he had a component stereo, and I just thought, wow, this is really cool stuff. But over the years, there are people been inside and outside the industry, just friends or people that whose stuff I'll come across and just go, this is I want to try and do that, and I've always been inspired to do something by here, and that's been a major part of my art, is just kind of turning around and taking something that's already there and just turning around and making it into an audio soundscape of some kind.
So now today, we have all the tools, digital tools, to do this. At your fingertip.
So what?
Yeah, and really, any young kid, can do this. Maybe not with the same artistic aesthetic that you have, or that you've approached it with. But if you look, a lot of people, a lot of kids can do mashups and all kinds of stuff with the software. Unlike back in the day with records and tape and splicing tape. I got into this whole thing with reel-to-reels as well, and splicing up tape, doing tape splices. And when I was in college studying music, I actually was checking out like John Cage and some of his early tape splicing experiments back in the late 50s. But now all those tools are available. And how has that changed your approach? Are you still taking the same tactic? Are you finding something new? Or are you just dismayed by the crap that's being released out there today in the audio landscape?
I guess what I'm mostly dismayed about is the amount of time that I have to do things that I did when I was a lot younger and had to do it the hard way with analog. I also like to make. Sorry, there's a TriMet bus here.
No, it's great.
You're
talking about audio and sound and landscapes, and we're getting plenty of audio landscapes behind you as you talk.
I thought I'd give you a little something special.
There we go.
Let's see. It's when I started writing songs and making songs, for example, it was I would record the instrument, and then I would record another instrument with it, and then I would ping pong it onto another piece of tape, and then record another instrument on the next track, and then ping pong that onto another piece of tape, and the hallmark of my recordings was tape hiss, basically. And today, the thing that's changed is that you don't have to worry about that anymore.
Right.
You don't have to do so much. You're getting a decent take the first time because it's so easy to edit. You can edit down to a fraction of a second now, and it's just a click, it's just a mouse click.
Right.
That's one thing that's changed remarkably. It's almost overwhelming.
Yeah, it's almost no more fun.
When I started with I find it's totally amounts of fun, and I think I know maybe a quarter of what my digital audio workstation is capable of. But I just fire it up and I start playing, and it's just the hours just whiz by. But I could really honestly sit there all day and just do that, and compose in MIDI and make rhythms out of doors slamming and glasses hitting the table. It's just so easy and so remarkable. It almost outpaces the ideas, and it almost starts to create the ideas, which I think in a way audio has always done that. Here's going it's about 60 miles an hour up 12th Avenue.
Nice.
SUV.
So I was gonna jump in. So I was gonna say I kind of have a love-hate relationship with it, because yes, you're right. Like the tape hiss and all the things we used to actually have to really deal with, and MIDI and things like that. All of that, I would never want to go back. I mean, those tools, when MIDI came out and digital synthesis and sampling, I mean, that was just huge for us. And, a lot of my compositions and recordings were all based around that. But that said, I miss cutting tape. I miss, like, the actual mechanics of the machines, I mean, before there was a analog or a digital echo box, you would have a spring reverb, or before that an echoplex, which was essentially a tape loop with several tape heads that would run around. And if you ever watched like the old Led Zeppelin movie Song Remains the Same, or one of those, they're running this little box. They'd break on stage, but it's like several tape heads, one records and the others play back, and that's how you get the echo. The mellotron is one of the most distinctive sounds in keyboards, I think. I mean, if you look at
I love the mellotron.
Yeah, if you look at like the work of like Rick Wakeman, right? He used the mellotron.
Yeah.
And those were all essentially it was like the early analog version of a digital sampler, and it was tape loops within a keyboard, and the tape loops were of instruments playing. So you'd have a violin that would play a C, a D, D sharp, an E, and when you hit the keys on the mellotron, there was a little delay, but it would play back the actual sounds, and there's a reason why they called it a mellotron, and to this day, if you get a sampler, they have mellotron sounds in it. So that kind of visceral, and loading reels and literally splicing your points, I kind of miss all that, And I dig the people who take like old gear. Like I've noticed a renaissance in music where bands are taking old gear and old instruments and old vintage keyboards, right? I also miss the Mini Moog that I used to play with my friend back in high school, the actual analog dials. And I noticed there's a renaissance of that.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it doesn't mean you don't master the Pro Tools. Go ahead.
I miss my Farfisa combo organ that that even had a few bad keys on it, but it had a few bad keys on it, and I didn't want to repair it, and I have a little Casios that they're sort of scratchy and fuzzy, and they get dirt in them, and changes the sound. And yeah. I mean, there's something really special about all that stuff. There's whole record labels that specialize in. One Ghost Box out of the UK is one that it specializes in vintage instrument pop music, and it's contemporary, and that's what they're doing. And I mean, I think that's great. I've always been kind of like, wanting the next thing, and it almost, I'm glad to leave that stuff behind and move on to something that's fresh and especially it's easy to use. You're probably a more classically trained. I mean, you're actually a musician type as opposed to just someone who makes sound with electronic instruments. It's you probably play an instrument in real life, I was terrible at that stuff. I refused to practice and just never really picked up music theory very well, and so I always liked music, but I just wasn't disciplined as a musician. So like performing music live is kind of like something I really can't do very well. I can sing, but that's about it. And but I love getting in the studio and working with all that stuff. And so whatever makes the process easier, more fluid. That's what I gravitate towards.
Well, your audio landscapes are your instrument. I mean, it's just a different type of art, It reminded me about a little short story, which I will try to do a short story audience. we were talking about the old gear and analog gear, and I remember I was lucky enough when I was learning music when I was a teenager to have a friend who, like you, really, really wasn't a musician. Didn't have. I mean, I think he took the lessons. Same thing. I mean, he really, really didn't pick up performing on an instrument, but he was really into electronics and really into music. He DJ'd for years in college. He went on to get an electronics degree, but he saved up all his money picking berries in a field for like 3 summers to buy a Mini Moog. And so, I mean, here's this kid in high school with a Mini Moog, which was pretty cool, and we would get together in summers. We would go to garage sales. We would buy old tape reels. They would be broken. We'd solder them up because we had some electronic skills, and we'd do all these recordings. And we'd record with his cousin who was a guitar player, so we had a few musicians who could actually play, and then we'd have the Mini Moog, and we'd experiment. We'd play rock, whatever. And I remember this one time, and just to talk about how this equipment reacted. It had a heart and a life of its own because the old synthesizers were not digital; they were analog circuitry. All kinds of weather changes and things like that would change the characteristics. You'd actually have to tune your synthesizer each time you played it. There would be like an oscillator in there that you tune it up to because it would never be the same. And I remember one winter, he brought it over, we set it up, we turned it on, we plugged it in, and it just started magically playing itself. So there was, I don't know what it was. It was like static electricity was firing off the oscillators and creating music, like literally cyborg, power it on, turn it on, plug it in, and the Mini Moog's playing itself. There was no intelligence behind it. It had to do with static electricity and the way the analog circuits worked. But what a crazy, weird, spiritual type experience that is.
And you recorded it, right?
I think we tried to. I think actually that was one of those moments that were lost. I think we didn't have the tape decks rolling. And we were kids too, so it wasn't like, looking back on it now, you kind of look at it and go, wow, what an amazing moment, right? The machine is speaking to us, Back then you're like, maybe back then you're looking at it going, what the hell's it doing? I don't know. Must be the static electricity. Walk up, it's like a theremin, right? You walk up with your hand and it starts, well, crap. We need to record this track, so we need to tell it to knock it off, right? But I mean, it's like those kind of moments that I just don't think you're going to get with digital, in the digital realm. And I don't, I know I'm throwing out there, I'm rambling, but
that's okay, And I mean, I think what it's making sure that your recorded button is on all the time, or at least as much as possible, and you're capturing as much source material as you can. But
good point.
But what that does is it creates a plethora of material, and that's what gets lost in the digital realm. That's when you have so much stuff. I mean, I'm pushing. You're probably way beyond me, but I'm pushing 500 gigs of WAV files, of just stuff that I've recorded.
Oh yeah.
And there's no way I'm going to ever listen to all that in my lifetime. And it's all I can do to just sort of like open something up and grab something and start messing with it. But there's so much that I'm losing, and there's so much that I can never even get my head around it. That it's really challenging. That to me is like kind of the downside of it. Is that there's
So
there's
you brought
so much
something
out there that I can't do.
Yeah, you brought up something really, really interesting there, and I think that the point is that back in the analog days, you were restricted by the storage medium. So yeah, you could have an hour-long reel-to-reel with audio and capture audio on tape, but it was really finite. The storage medium was finite, so what you had to work with was finite and somewhat deterministic. You'd have to say, hey, I need that bird chirp. I don't have a bird chirp. I might have to go out and get one. Unless you were at some studio like in London and had like the BBC reference tapes, right, that took up buildings and buildings, which none of us had, you really had a finite storage. Today, in the digital world, you have too much. I mean, I can't find the crap I've recorded. I mean, I've recorded all my stuff. I've transferred stuff. Video's even worse. I mean, how do you deal with it with all the material that you've created over time? And now here you go. You got infinite storage.
It's next to impossible to do anything for me to do anything beyond put a date on something and save it in the place where I think I'm going to be able to find it again. But when you're talking about like sound effects libraries and things like that, I mean, people have spent hours indexing all of that stuff, and today indexing for me is just, I mean, it's like I have a 300 gig WAV file that I recorded on Monday the 16th of November, and it goes in this folder on my hard drive, and I barely even know. See, like for example, tonight I'm sitting out here instead of at the open mic, so it's like I don't even know basically what I'm getting until I listen to it later, and I'll have some sense of what all that stuff is. But I mean, there's just gobs and gobs of stuff that's being recorded all the time, and yeah, there's no way to really say, okay, well, I'm going to get every single good thing out of here and know where to find it again when I want it. But when you're talking about getting a bird chirp or something like that, I mean, if you want to get a bird chirp, I know where to get a bird chirp. So
right, yeah,
true. The issue is how to find that unique thing, that unique combination of stuff, that somebody says, or that weird confluence of music and noise and whatever that. I mean, you just kind of like know it when you hear it, and then you just go from there.
So, first off, I'd like to tell you, hey, thank you for joining us tonight on Monday. I totally spaced the fact that you do that event on Monday, and I really do appreciate it.
I do have to go wrap up right now. I was very fortunate tonight that we invited some musicians that were great, and then and we also invited his lawnmower, but they brought their own sound system, and he's tearing down, and I hardly have anything to do. But I do have to turn off the digital recorder and say goodbyes and all that stuff. So, but I hope I can be on later in the month, because we have so much to talk about.
Absolutely, I think we need to get back on here and pick up where we left off. I would love to do that with you, Luke. You're my kind of guy.
Great.
You're into audio. You've got the whole thing going on. So
well, I hope the listeners have enjoyed it. I've just been delighted to be here, and my best to Cammie and the family, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much, Luke. And you get that digital audio recorder turned off.
Okay.
Take care.
Take her easy, my friend.
You too. Bye. All right. So the good news is this is going to be a short one tonight. So we talked about experimentation, audio experimentation. That's what this is. Crazy Talk is an experiment in audio for your streaming and listening pleasure or not. I'm not sure where this is all going to go after November, after NaPodPoMo. I'm kind of torn. We're only about halfway through, so we'll see. We will have Luke back and talk about his experience in NaPodPoMo. He had a very interesting one, and if you go back, if you go search the archives back in 2008, November, NaPodPoMo, Broken Hours, he's got some interesting landscapes there, including the one from Ignite, where you could actually listen through and pick out certain voices in the background, and also certain podcasts that were sponsoring that night. We'll talk more about that later. I appreciate everyone who's here to join me in this experiment. we'll see where it goes. And that's it. Hopefully tomorrow night we'll have a special guest. We've been working on this. I know he just flew into town, but hey, bro, if you're out there, let's talk tomorrow night. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining me. Good night, everybody.